So good afternoon, everyone. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me okay out there? Awesome, thank you. Well, first of all, my name is Mick Steiner. I'm the housing coordinator here at Ohio State ATI in Worcester, and I want to thank you very much for spending your afternoon with us. I'm sure, like a lot of students and families out there, Zoom is becoming a more normal part of our lives. So for those of you who are just using this service for the first time, we'll try to make it as user-friendly as possible. And I think we're all in agreement that we're all still learning the new technology and the ways to connect that's around us. So first of all, certainly thank you for your interest in Ohio State ATI, and we hope that you continue to learn more about campus and find that truly Worcester will become that home away from home for you. There are a few goals of our session today, and one is to introduce you to some of the nuts and bolts of the housing contract process, which is the first step to living on campus. We hope to give you some tips and tricks along the way, and also to be able to answer any questions that you may have about what it's like to live on campus or any of the steps leading up to the contracting process itself. So as I go through the presentation today, I'll be sharing some screenshots, and it might be helpful to take some notes if you'd like, but this is also being recorded, and it's something that you can reference at a later time. What I would not recommend doing is necessarily trying to work through your contract side by side if you've not done it yet. We're probably going to move at a pace that's a little too quick for that today, but certainly this would be a great resource for you at a later time. I'm also going to ask Liz, who is with our ATI admissions office, to help monitor any questions that may come through. I know there will probably be folks that are joining us throughout the session today. Feel free to put a question out in the chat feature, or if you'd like, we'll take some formal questions at the end of the session. So one more quick check here. I just want to make sure everyone can see the PowerPoint in front of them off to the side. You can see that, housing contracts, awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video then as I go through. So hopefully you can still see the screen there. Okay, so just a little bit about living on campus in general to get us started. We do require that first-year students live on campus. We do see a strong value from those that do live on campus. So there are a couple exceptions, and those are students who are living with close family members or relatives within 25 miles of ATI here in Worcester. Otherwise, if you were a traditional aged high school student who graduated here or is going to graduate in upcoming May or June of 2020, we would ask that you live on campus. There are a couple other exemptions that typically apply to students. Might be a situation that applies to you, such as if you're married or if you've had children, if you've been out of high school for more than 1 year, if you've been in a living environment where you've established some previous independence, maybe you've been your own caretaker or your own caregiver previously, or special circumstances such as medical necessity, financial hardship, or special hardship. Those are all separate application processes should you not wish to live on campus. For those traditional 2020 graduates who will be commuting, the form you see here on the screen is an example of that parent close relative exemption. We're going to ask you to find that online at housing.osu.edu, and we're going to ask you to complete that prior to June 1st of this year. When that form is completed, it does need to be notarized, and you can go ahead and return that directly to the Housing Services office in Columbus. And the address is listed here on the screen. You can drop it by the admissions office if campus is in a position to reopen and is accepting guests. You can also share that with the ATI housing office, or you can email it directly to housing@osu.edu. You'll hear me reference housing services quite a bit throughout the presentation today. That is the office that helps centrally manage the housing contracts as well as billing and roommate assignments. That happens prior to the start of classes or prior to when you arrive to us in August. So as you may have been checking your email at this point in time, You may have found that you received a link to complete your housing contract back on March 14th. That was the first round of emails that were sent out with a link to the contract. If you've been admitted since that time, contracts are sent out on a rolling basis every Friday. So sometimes it may take a week or two after you've been admitted to actually receive your contract link. Students, we're definitely going to encourage you to check your OSU email, known as Buckeye Mail, on a regular basis, and no less than once per week during your time with us prior to the start of classes. That will ensure that you don't miss any important information that is being shared. University housing only communicates through email, so that will be the only way that we will be able to share that message with you moving forward. Students, as long as you are 18 or older, you are able to complete your contract entirely online. For those who are underage, you will be required to print a signature page at the end of the contract process. That signature page will need to be signed by a parent or guardian and returned with your deposit fees in order to ensure that your contract is completed. Completing a housing contract is your commitment to live on campus. So it is a commitment to do so. If you happen to change your mind prior to June 1st, you are able to receive $150 of that $350 fee you paid initially to hold your bed space. Keep in mind that a completed contract is the actual application, as well as your space reservation and filing fee that we'll talk about here shortly. To get to the housing contract site itself, that's the link here at the top. It's housing.osu.edu/living-on-campus/regional. When you log or when you go to this web page itself, you're going to notice there are some links that might be helpful to read through. For students, I know a lot of this information can seem cumbersome and also very legalistic. So you might want to take an opportunity to share that information with parents or guardians so you fully understand what you are agreeing to prior to completing the contract itself. Step one is where you're able to access the terms and conditions of the contract. And then beyond that, step two is actually the contract addendum, some additional pieces that apply to the housing contract process, and specifically for ATI. When you read through all those steps then and you're ready to move on to actually complete your contract, you're going to click on the link next to step number 3 that says access and complete your contract. So when you click on step 3, it will take you to a login page that looks much like this. Just below that black arrow here, you will see a very small login button. You're going to want to click on that to access your contract. Sorry, it's kind of stuck here. There we go. So when you get to this page, you will see a button to click OSC Web Login, which will take you to the housing contract portal itself. And you should see a screen that will probably look very familiar to you very soon if it doesn't already. This is where you'll enter your university login information. So as long as you have been assigned your name.number and you have a password, it should be very similar to the password that you're using to check your email on a regular basis. You'll go ahead and enter that information here, which will then get you to the contract page itself. And this is the front page of the housing contract portal. Under the large black arrow, that is a link that you'll want to click on to access the regional contracts. So new student housing contract, Columbus and regional. All students will click that link to access the contract page. And now this is where you're actually clicking into the contract itself. So a couple pieces to note here before moving forward is that certainly upon applying to the university, you entered some information in on your application. and that populates in a system called Buckeye Link. So as you go throughout the contract, you'll notice that some of that information will auto-populate. It's very important as you go through the contract to ensure that the information you are submitting is correct. So it is totally possible that maybe your name has changed since you were admitted to the university, or maybe there was another piece of identifying information that has changed or shifted. Is very important that you make sure that you update that throughout the contract. To get started, you'll click the red button in the bottom right corner. And before doing so, you'll just want to verify that the correct academic year is listed in that yellow box. So for those of you joining us in the fall, you'll want to see academic year 2020-2021 as the contract term. So go ahead and then you would click that red apply button to advance into the contract itself. Part of the important process of moving through the contract is on certain pages you are not able to necessarily go back and make changes. So it is critically important that you verify all information before hitting the next button in the contract itself. On this welcome screen, it will show you over on the right side an offer expiration date. Typically that is a few months after you have accessed your contract for the first time. Keep in mind the priority deadline for all housing contracts is June 1st. We'll talk a little bit more about the importance of that deadline later, but that is an important date to ensure that housing is still available for you. Also on that right side, just above that black arrow, you will want to verify that you see the correct campus of enrollment. If you're joining us from another OSU campus, or perhaps you started your journey at the Columbus campus and then you made a last-minute decision to change campuses, you will want to verify that you are completing a contract for ATI. If for some reason you do not see ATI listed there, you'll want to contact Housing Services, and I will give you that information at the end of the presentation. So again, there is one more warning here before moving on in the contract that's going to ask you to understand what you are signing up for. That includes the terms and conditions, the undergraduate addendum, and also note about online payment. So at the end of the contract, you will be requested to make payment. If you're able to do so, you can pay online. There is a $2 convenience fee if you choose to pay online. Otherwise, if you choose to pay by check or by phone, you're able to do that through the Columbus campus. Again, keep in mind that your space reservation is not finalized until your contract is completed and fees are paid. As you move on, you'll be taken to the electronic signature selection page. This is important for a few reasons. So because this is an online process, for most students, there is not a need to necessarily print and sign the contract. So if you choose the electronic signature option, which is what we highly recommend, you're able to select this option if you're 18 or older. All you would do in the drop down is select the yes box. If you are underage and you're not able to complete the online process, then you would have to select no, and you'd be taken to the signature print page at the end of the contract itself. And here's an example of the option in the drop-down that will be just below as you scroll down that page. This is again giving you the option whether or not you want to do the electronic signature. When you're ready to move on, you'll click Save and Continue. The general information page is your basic general demographic information that is pulled directly through Buckeye Link. So name, phone number, cell phone number, preferred name, birth, sex. Oftentimes students leave some of that information blank. That will become important at a later time when you're attempting to select roommates. So roommates at the university are assigned based on your birth sex. So if for some reason that is empty or blank or incorrect, you do want to make sure you get that corrected through the Buckeye Link office. It could take up to 24 hours for that information to update in the housing contract system once it's corrected. As you work through the contract, the next page here is to accept a notification about missing students. So we do take our student safety seriously, and we also take privacy seriously. So if you believe, or if we believe that a student has been missing for longer than a period of 24 hours, we're asking you to provide us with some emergency contact information of who we will contact in the event that the student goes missing. So keep that in mind. We do not necessarily reach out and communicate with parents otherwise unless there's a FERPA waiver signed for a particular situation. So this is simply just who we will notify if you go missing. Advancing on to the next page, this is for supplemental concerns. So there's a few questions that are asked here, such as anything that we may need to consider in regards to special assignment. So oftentimes this can be things such as you need a one-story unit because using stairs is difficult or impossible for our students who use wheelchairs. It could be that you have a recommendation from a doctor to live with fewer people instead of living in an apartment, let's say, with 3 others. It could be a specific disclosed disability in which you have documentation that we need to consider for your placement. So now is a good time, thinking about what your needs are in high school and what your needs may be in an independent living environment, and make sure that you're scheduling those appointments with your healthcare providers prior to June 1st. Any documentation that is received prior to June 1st will be used in consideration of your campus placement and housing. So there's a small box in section 2 to describe any accommodations that you may have. We do encourage supplemental documentation from a healthcare provider to be sent directly to housing services, and you can do that through email. You can take a picture, you can scan a copy, or send a fax, whatever works best for you. But typically email works best, and you'll also receive a confirmation that it is received. All those supplemental accommodations are processed centrally through the Columbus Housing Services office. There's also the option here to indicate any non-food allergies you may have. So students don't often think about this, but we do have quite a few emotional support animals on campus. So if you are allergic to dogs or cats, that would be a great opportunity to put that information in that box. All right, moving on to dining plans. So as a residential student, you do have an option to eat on campus here, and that option is known as Cafe Carmen. It's located on the lower level of SCO Hall, one of our 2 main academic buildings. So Cafe Carmen is open for breakfast and lunch hours, and ATI is the only campus where a residential meal plan is optional. So we certainly don't want you to feel pressured into getting a meal plan. But certainly the majority of our students do start out with a Carmen 1 meal plan, which is smaller of the 2 plan options. Keep in mind as you're considering whether or not you wish to have a dining plan, there are full kitchens provided here in the apartments. So you'll have your refrigerator as well as your stove and your oven. You might want to consider bringing a microwave or any other types of kitchen appliances that may make your stay more comfortable. But you do certainly have cooking ability in your apartment. Meal plans are always reviewed on an annual basis. So the plans for this coming year will not typically be finalized until July. The university does use a cohort billing model. So the price that you pay for housing, dining, and tuition will not change during your time here at the ATI campus. So that price you begin paying as a first-year student will follow you throughout your time here on the campus. In the drop-down underneath the meal plan options that you see there in red, you can select Carmen 1, Carmen 2, or no meal plan. If you end up getting to campus and you decide that maybe you're a lighter eater than you expected, or maybe you're running out of dining dollars, you can always add more onto your plan at any point in time. Or if you choose not to have a plan whatsoever, you can cancel your meal plan before the second Friday of each semester. So that's really, really important. We want to make sure that you understand the flexibility of the meal plan. Another bonus to your meal plan, the major component of the meal plan itself is known as dining dollars. It is a lump sum of money that's placed on your meal plan card. When you dine on campus, the amount of that purchase is deducted from the balance. So you can simply go in to the cafe and purchase a beverage. You can go in and purchase a full meal. Dollar for dollar is deducted from your overall balance. Also on this screen to the right, you'll see you have the option to indicate any special dietary concerns, as well as any additional Buck ID cash that you would like to put onto your Buck ID card. So even for students who do not select a meal plan option, if you'd like to simply add some flexible spending cash, which is Buck ID cash, you can add any amount above $10, and you can continue to do so throughout the academic year at buckid.oscu.edu. Buck ID cash can be used both on campus for dining purchases as well as off campus at some select vendors here in town, as well as in the vending machines and some other services around the campus. If you want to add additional dining dollars in addition to what's provided in the meal plan, certainly you can do that on this screen as well. Through the link on this page, you can click into reading more about dining services as well as the specifics of each of the meal plans. The only major difference between the two is the amount of dining dollars on the plan itself. So just a little bit more on dining plans. One of the major benefits of having a dining plan, especially for parents and family members, is knowing that money that you've allotted for meals will be spent on meals and meals only. So for example, it is common for students to eat in their apartment or maybe plan shared meals with other students on campus. But it's also helpful to know that there is an option to go dine on campus and maybe grab a quick bite to eat between classes when you're in the academic building. So one of the benefits of the meal plan itself is you pay 35% additional upfront to be a meal plan holder. When you dine in a student life dining facility such as Cafe Carmen here at ATI, you receive 35% off that menu price. So in the end, it all shakes out. If you happen to be a later eater than you expected, any dining dollars you have left over at the end of each semester will continue to roll over through graduation. So you end up not losing what you don't use. So that is a tremendous value and benefit to the plan. And like I said, dining dollars themselves are only used for food purchases. So again, you cannot be applying those dollars to other types of purchases. Moving on to personal habits and preferences. So working through the contract, we're going to ask you some questions that will help us learn more about you and could potentially be used as some helpful information in making roommate assignments. So we certainly know that students sometimes don't always have a realistic view, or maybe a parent is helping complete the housing contract. We want to make sure you're truthful and honest as possible when answering these questions. These are the only questions that are asked to help make those roommate type of accommodations and roommate matches. So you'll see there's only 5 of them. So we ask about smoking, alcohol consumption, overnight guests, and whether or not you're a morning person or a night owl, and how many hours you typically tend to sleep in a day. So students, again, we really encourage you to be the ones who complete this portion of the contract. Don't think about the person you hope to become in college. Think about the person who is your true self and answer these questions very honestly. And certainly we need to acknowledge that while we do not condone underage drinking, we understand that it may certainly occur on a college campus. Again, answering questions like that honestly will help ensure that we provide you the best possible roommate match. Toward the very bottom of the screen, you'll see there is a personal description there. And that's where you get to actually type out anything you'd like to share about yourself that may be helpful regarding what you're studying, your academics, any hobbies or other interests. Anything you write in that box can be used as a search feature to match you with other students who are looking for roommates. And you'll be able to see as you scroll down, you can check a box whether or not you wish to publicly share that information and whether or not you want that to be searchable. So just keep that in mind as you're answering honestly about yourself. One of the main descriptors used to match roommates is typically students of the same major. As you get through that screen, now we get to talk a little bit about roommate requests. So I just want to put a couple disclaimers out there up front. And certainly that is students may not always get along well with those that they are coming in with from high school. So you really want to think about whether or not it is a good idea for you to live with that best friend or maybe a friend that's already here on the campus. You might want to think about the value in branching outside of that social circle, making some new friends, as well as thinking about what it's like to live with that best friend versus just visiting with them at school on a daily basis. Oftentimes we find that students live best with random strangers versus those that they have maybe known previously, and how that relationship may change when you come to college. So those are just a couple things to think about. When it comes to roommate requests, you can request both incoming other first-year students. You can request current existing students here at ATI. However, throughout this contract process, you're only going to be able to find other first-year students who have also started their contract. So that's really important. So if you're searching for a roommate and you cannot find them, it's typically because they've not either started their contract or maybe they're already an existing student on the campus. If you are the first person in a roommate group, so let's say you have others that you would like to live with, you will be forming the roommate group and you'll be known as the group leader. So we'll walk through that in just a moment. It's really important to know as you are forming roommate groups and sending requests of each other, only requests that are mutual will be honored. So keep in mind sometimes students feel a little bit pressured or concerned about turning down a friend that they may or may not want to live with. So keep in mind, we're not able to necessarily share whether or not a request was accepted. Those are conversations you need to have within your friend group. But what we can share is that if the request is not mutual, then it is very likely, unless by chance, that you would happen to be paired together as roommates. If you're coming into ATI and you don't know any existing friends, or you certainly are more interested in selecting a random roommate, that is perfectly fine. And I would say that the majority of our students tend to go that route. And we'll talk about how to search for those people in just a moment. A really important deadline to keep in mind is June 1st, 2020. June 1st is the last day that we guarantee housing is available. It is also the last day to request roommates, and it's the last day that we would offer any type of refund or 50% refund should you choose to cancel your contract. So please keep in mind what an important date that is, and also an important date to make sure that you have your accommodations received by the Central Housing Office. If you're interested in creating a roommate group, typically this is done by the first person in the friend group to access their contract, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes students realize, there's actually multiple groups being created. If there happens to be a situation like that, you can certainly just email housing@osc.edu, and everyone who wishes to be a part of that roommate group would need to follow the same process. If you are the group leader, we're going to ask you to create a name for your group as well as a password. So we do see these names, so you do want to keep them appropriate. When you do create that password, you want to share it with those with whom you wish to live with. So again, group leaders, you have some additional responsibility. As requests are sent to those roommates you want to live with, you need to make sure and verify that they are all accepted prior to the June 1st deadline. So keep in mind here again at the bottom, there's a note about gender. If you happen to have left your gender blank, or you have not updated your birth sex in Buckeye Link, that will need to match those in your roommate group before you are able to move forward with selecting those individuals as roommates. All right, so again, here's where you would, if you're creating that roommate group, here's where you would enter the name as well as the password, or if you're joining an existing group, you would follow that similar process. Like I said, if you don't have a roommate in mind, you can also search by commonalities, and this is based on that information that you agreed to share. So you can either check the box if you wish to exclude those results, or you can search by descriptions, and it's almost like by hashtags. So you can just type keywords and it will search for others based on their lifestyle preferences. Moving on, you actually get to select your preferred apartment type and preferences. So keep in mind here that the majority of our first-year students tend to live in a 2-bedroom unit with 4 students total. So that occupancy has dropped a little bit since some previous years. So we're back down to our normal occupancy of 2 bedrooms for 4 students. A lot of our students do indicate you have an interest in maybe a 1-bedroom for 2. However, the reality is the majority of our returning students tend to take those types of units first. So just keep in mind that certainly requesting a particular apartment type may not be a guarantee that you will receive that in the end. We do encourage you to contract sooner than later. That is one of the best ways to get the style of living that you preferred. And as I mentioned, some of those are only offered on a limited basis. And we will certainly take your accommodations in mind and make sure that those needs are met in the placement of your apartment type. Okay, so you have the option to pick your top 4 choices. There's also going to be a question about any additional programs. My understanding that this may have changed a little bit for this year. So one is the Allies for Diversity program. So here you have an opportunity to indicate if you are a student who's excited to learn more about diversity, inclusion, and multiculturalism in their community. And if you agree to doing so, you'll receive some additional information and be offered opportunities for specific programs that are available at the university. You also get to indicate here whether or not you are requesting a roommate who also identifies as an ally. So unfortunately, we don't have formalized learning communities here at Ohio State ATI, where typically students of the same major live on a particular floor or section of the community. So that is not a question that you will be answering. Moving on to vaccination status, you may see this a few different times talked about today, both in the contract and then also the university vaccination requirement. So keep in mind from a housing perspective, which follows the state of Ohio recommendations, we are going to ask our residential students to indicate whether or not they've been vaccinated against hepatitis B as well as meningitis. So you will have to indicate that whether or not you've had the shot, you plan to get the shot, or you are not getting the shots whatsoever. And like I said, those are state of Ohio requirements. And most of the time, if you've attended a public high school in Ohio, you will have met those requirements. So it might be handy to have your vaccination records on hand as you're working through the contract. At the end of the presentation today, we'll talk more about the university vaccination requirement, which looks a little bit different. Moving on to personal property, accountability, and housing restrictions. So it is important to note that the university is not liable for any property damage, whether that is caused by a natural disaster, an acts of God, or any default types of situations that may happen through the facilities. Every year, not to scare you by any means, but every year, there's a toilet that overflows or something that happens where a student's property could possibly be damaged. So it is important to think about renter's insurance, as well as understanding your liability when it comes to bringing personal property to campus. And then finally, at the bottom of the screen, you do have to indicate whether or not you are a registered sex offender. Registered sex offenders are not permitted to live on campus. If you do answer yes to that question, you'll be contacted by a member of the university with alternative options to support you in your education. And then finally here at the signature page, this is where a lot of students and families get caught up, so pay special attention here. Keep in mind, you're going to enter your name dot number, which is the number attached to your email address. That will be your signature. However, below that, the date that is asking for here is your date of birth. So keep in mind that is not today's date, which is kind of what we're used to typically putting below our signature. Make sure you enter your date of birth. If you happen to mess that up or fill that out incorrectly, it will freeze you out of the contract. You'll have to contact Housing Services to get that reset. So fear not, but it may take a day or so to get you back into your contract. And then finally here, when it comes to payments, you'll be directed to your fee deposit page. So it will give you some information about whether or not you wish to pay online or send a check. What is required to make sure your contract payment is complete is a $300 space reservation fee. That simply holds your bed space. That is refundable, half refundable through June 1st, or fully refundable if you meet the criteria of living on campus for the full first year. So Ohio State ATI has a 1-year live-on requirement. If you happen to transition to Columbus, there's a 2nd-year live-on requirement there. But for ATI, just 1 year. As long as you meet the terms and conditions of your contract for year 1, you will get your $300 space reservation fee back at the end of your time with us. In addition to the $300 is a $50 non-refundable one-time filing fee. So unfortunately, that $50 does go away. Like I said previously, if you choose to pay online, there's a $2 service fee, and you can mail checks directly to Housing Services in Columbus if that's the option you're using. I would encourage you, especially for students who are 17 or underage, definitely make sure you send your check along with the signature page at one time. That just helps ensure that all the records match across the board. If you are paying online, you'll be directed to a screen that looks like this. You will see your service fee as well as your $350 payment. You'll click on the red Pay Now button in the bottom left corner, and that will direct you to a page that looks like this for you to complete your billing information. You will get a copy of your receipt by email, so that will be our confirmation that that payment was received. You should also be directed to a screen that looks like this that says Payment Successful. So that is a great screen to come across. That means you've done everything and your contract is nearly completed in full. So the last screen that you'll see looks like this. So if, again, for those underage students, you're going to want to make sure that you do print the signature page, and it will give you some more details here about how to do so. There's also an option to upload your signature page on the screen should you wish to do so after it's printed. And then this is your confirmation page. So again, you'll see a congratulatory message letting you know that you've worked your way through the many, many steps to complete your contract. So if for any reason, you come across technical difficulties and it doesn't appear to be on necessarily your service provider, but it appears to be within the contract itself, you can contact that number here, 614-292-8266. There are helpful folks down in Housing Services who are available 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and they are happy to take questions. You can also email the general housing email. It's just housing@osc.edu, and they are happy to certainly take your questions as well. You're welcome to, at the end of the contract, to actually print and keep a copy for your records, should you wish to refer to your preferences at a later time. So, before we jump into questions, we will just quickly cover the university vaccination requirement, and then we'll jump into questions that you may have at that time. So as you saw in the contract itself, there are 2 questions per the state of Ohio that we're asking you to complete about your vaccination records. In addition, as a student who lives on campus, there's a separate university housing requirement for a vaccination record and completion of meningitis. So we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. Commuter students do not have to worry about this requirement, as it is simply optional for them. The university vaccination requirement is administered through Student Health Services, and their web address is shs.oscu.edu, or you can also reach them at that phone number on the screen should you have questions about vaccinations moving forward. On the website, shs.oscu.edu, just above this gray area here at the center of the screen, you'll see a link to click on vaccinations. When you click that link, you will be provided some options and some more information about how to actually complete the university requirement. So, excuse me. You will note that there are various forms listed on the right side of the page that you'll find on the website. Currently, the housing student form is not posted. And I noticed that a few months ago, and I double checked today, it is still not there. And I did notify health services that it's still not there. So the form that you actually need to complete is not currently showing on that website. I'll show you a sample in just a moment. Once it is posted, you're able to click directly on that form. You can print out a copy for yourself and provide that to your healthcare provider or whoever administered that vaccination to you. Sometimes that could be nurse practitioner or board of health. It doesn't really matter. And you're also able to use previous vaccination records now. You don't necessarily have to have a record on the university form. The most important thing to note, though, is that whatever form or record you submit, it does have to be signed by that provider. So please keep that in mind. Here's a sample of what the form itself looks like. So you would technically complete the housing student form. It's only going to ask you for that one vaccination down there at the bottom. If you have other records that you have previously from your provider, you can use those as well. If you choose not to be vaccinated, there are 2 exemptions. One is a general exemption. Another is a medical exemption. So you can review those forms that are also online and see whether or not those situations may apply to you. Once you have a completed form, whether from your provider or on the university form, there are several ways to get that information submitted to the university. So one way, and the easiest way, is through uploading that form through BuckMD. So that is the safe, secure place where all of your medical records as a student are kept. It's an online portal, and again, you can log in through shs.osu.edu, and there's a link to click into BuckMD, and it will have you log in again to share that information. You can also email your vaccination form, or you can send it through the mail, or you can bring it with you to summer orientation, which most likely will be going virtual. So you'll be thinking about ways to do that, most likely submitting that electronically in advance to make sure that it's all taken care of prior to your arrival in August. If you are uploading your form, keep in mind it is a 2-step process. So step number 1 is to click on the document upload tab that is circled there. And that is a great way to submit your actual document. So it could be a PDF, it could be a picture that you've taken on your phone, you can scan it, whatever is most convenient for you as long as it's legible. And then under the My Forms button, you're going to also want to click there, and it's going to ask you to manually type in the dates of the vaccinations. So that is also an important step. Students often miss one or the other, so make sure you completed both of those to meet the requirement. Should you not complete this process in full prior to spring registration, which usually happens sometime around October, you will have a hold placed on your account, so you won't be able to register for classes or do any type of business with the university. So it is a really important step in order to make sure you have all the rights and privileges of students on campus. All right, so we are at the point of questions.
Hey, Mick.
Yeah.
We have a question that came through on the chat. Is there a way to review the contract our student has completed before we send it in?
So the best way to review that would be to work all the way through the contract, and when you get to that very last page that says congratulations, you can review it there. Otherwise, I would say sitting side by side and doing it together might be the best way to just ensure that you're seeing exactly what your student is seeing.
That is the only question that I've had so far on the chat.
Okay.
So if anyone else has any further questions, feel free to throw it up in the chat.
And again, while we're waiting, in case anyone wants to think of some questions, certainly you can reach out to us. We are still working, and you're certainly able to reach us at that main number, or it will guide you to call us at a separate number if we are working remotely and no one is in the office at the time. Also, the central housing office number in Columbus is a great resource prior to your arrival on campus, and that's the 614-292-8266 number as well. So you can certainly reach out to either of us. We're happy to help, and if we can't help, we'll certainly direct you to the central office for further information. I know it did not get brought up today, but if you're having concerns potentially about signing a housing contract without knowing what the status of the university may look like come August, it would be important to note that there is not necessarily a plan for what that would look like at this time yet. So if students are not able to move in August for some reason, we certainly will be able to address that as things get a little bit further along in the summer. We know what the state of Ohio looks like at that time.
She might not be coming home for some proper advice for this afternoon.
All right. Do you want to listen in case? No. Okay.
Oh my God.
Mick, there is a question regarding that just came into the chat. Do you know the move-in date for freshmen?
Misquoted. It'll be Saturday, August 22nd. It'll be move-in day. Typically, the way that works is students are notified of their address in advance. Then we give you essentially a half a day window to move in. So half the campus will arrive in the morning, half will arrive in the afternoon based on your student's apartment address. And that's typically how that goes.
All right.
All right, I think we are good. Certainly, please reach out. You know, as these times are very uncertain, we're thinking of all of our students and our families who are also experiencing the difficulties of wrapping up the academic year and that very special senior year of high school. So please know that you're in our thoughts. We very much look forward to seeing you on campus and welcoming you this fall. So take good care of yourselves and your families, and hope you stay well. And refer back to this resource moving forward should you have any other questions or need assistance along the way. So take care. Thank you all.